So, most of us are familiar with theater music in Western culture, Broadway, opera, and musical movies, for example. But today I'd like to tell you about something quite different from that, the traditional music of Japanese theater. Now, in Japanese theater, there are two forms that are most prevalent, and these are Noh theater and Kabuki theater. But before I tell you more about those, let me give you the basics. So, in Japanese music, there are two main scales, the Yo scale and the In scale. Now, the Yo scale, using Western scale degrees, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that we would normally number the notes of the major and minor scales. The Yo scale is built of scale degrees 1, 2, jump to 4, 5, and 6. So starting on D, which is a very common starting pitch for Japanese traditional music, but this can vary depending on the instrument that is being played. But this would, for the Yo scale, it would be D, E, G, A, B, and then the octave D. The In scale is quite similar. It's just a modified version of the same scale, and it uses scale degrees 1, flat 2, 4, 5, flat 6, and then the octave. So that would be D, E flat, G, A, B flat, D. In traditional Japanese music, there are all sorts of contexts that music can be played. Some are religious, and in Japan, the two most common religions at the time that this music is most common was Buddhism and Shintoism. And Shintoism is a folk religion that existed in Japan for a really long time before the Buddhist influence infiltrated the country later on as it spread across Asia from India. And this music can also bleed into any sort of celebrations related to these religions, but this also borrows a little bit from folk music as well. Another context for traditional music is court music, which is called gagaku. This would be where the imperial court, the emperor or empress, would go and watch music be played, either music by itself or music with dance. The next is minyo, which is folk music. This is a very broad category that includes a lot of different styles and instruments, but it sort of just applies to all types of music played by average people. And lastly, we have theater music, which, of course, applies directly to performance and acting. So a little bit about the instruments of Japanese music, many of which are borrowed from China. Some are not, but most are. First here we have the shakuhachi, which is a type of inblown flute. So you play it like this, like you see this woman in this illustration playing. And it's constructed out of the bass part, just the bottom part of a bamboo stalk. And it's very prevalently used in folk music, and it was originally used by a particular sect of priests that would use it for meditation. But now it is more commonly played as a folk instrument. And here's an example of what the shakuhachi sounds like. Next, we have the biwa, which is a 4 or 5 string lute-like instrument that is played with a large pick called a bachi, which you can see here that this woman is playing. This is the biwa itself, the black lute that she's holding, and then the bachi is the very, very large plectrum or pick that she's holding in her hand. And the biwa has a really interesting tradition of being used to play narrative music. The performers were traditionally blind Buddhist monks, and they would perform stories in song, poetic song, that would tell legends of old war heroes and things like that. But it was only these people that would play it, and they would do it in front of their temples to possibly make some side money. Also, maybe just for entertainment and sort of public service, maybe even just for fun. But that's how the instrument started, and this instrument is directly derived from the Chinese pipa. If you've seen that, it looks very similar. The pipa has more frets, but the style, like the shape and the way it's played is quite similar. Here's an example of a piece for biwa. And next in the folk instrument category, we have the koto, which is a harp. Typically, the koto has 13 strings. That's the most common, but sometimes it has 17. More common in the modern era is the 25-string koto, which is what is called the concert koto. And as you can see here, it's quite long, and it features these little bridges that go all the way up to change the pitch. Each individual string is the same tension if you take the bridges out, but the bridges apply different amounts of tension to the string to change its pitch. And it's played with both hands, but mostly by the right hand right here. And you can kind of see, and the video that you'll see momentarily will make it clearer, that she's wearing picks on her first 3 fingers, her thumb, index, and middle finger. And she does this particular song, she does involve her left hand sometimes, but it's the right hand that mostly plays the melody. And so here's an example of koto music. This woman's playing a very famous and popular folk song called Sakura, which means cherry blossoms. And now I'd just like to mention the instruments of the theater. In the Noh theater, the types of instruments used are the nokan, which is a type of flute, and the tsuzumi, which are drums. And in the Kabuki theater is the shamisen, which you see here, this gentleman playing, which is another guitar or lute style instrument. It's played with a plectrum, a bachi, also called a bachi, but it's not quite as big as the biwa. And then also taiko drums and other forms of percussion. So now let's talk about Noh theater. Noh theater began out of sort of folk traditions that were later combined into a modern form. So the 2 types of folk theater that were combined into Noh theater were sarugaku and dengaku. So sarugaku began as a style of folk theater that mainly took the form of ritual plays, sort of pantomime rituals performed by workers at a temple, kind of for fun and for entertainment of the people that would come to visit them on a particular holiday or something. But these later took on more popular and comedic elements that were combined into a sort of more free-form form of theater that didn't rely on the temple and religious ceremony. Dengaku, however, was another style of folk theater, but it was performed by farmers as opposed to priests and other temple workers. And it was more angled at music as opposed to sort of performance. And it involved folk song and dance. Later on in the 14th century, father and son actors Kanami Koyotsugu and his son Zayami Motokiyo wanted to create a more serious and elevated form of sarugaku. They enjoyed it, but they thought it was maybe a little too commonplace. They wanted it to be something that the elite could enjoy too, that the court might enjoy even. And they just wanted to tone down the comedic element a little bit and focus more on the dance and the actual acting. And so they created a new serious theatrical manner that they called Sarugaku no No, which means talents of the folk theater. And this was later shortened to just the term No, which by itself means talent or ability or even accomplishment. So if you are a performer in the Noh theater, you are quite talented and you are quite accomplished as a performer. You can do all of these complicated forms of dance, you're a good actor, and you're a pretty good singer. In Sarugaku no No, Kanami and Zayami added elements of Buddhist chant, which is called shomyo, which is quite serious. So that really added to the seriousness of the drama and the seriousness of the situation. One thing they did retain from the original Sarugaku sort of comic theater was the orchestra, and this included the 3 drums, the tsuzumi and the taiko drum, and the nokan flute. And so a little bit about the orchestra, which is called the hayashi. So we have the nokan flute, which is a small bamboo flute. You see it here on the right in this picture. It's a small bamboo flute with 7 finger holes, and it has a similar range to the European piccolo. It's quite shrill. It's used as a melodic instrument either by itself or accompanying a singer or the chorus and ornamenting that main melody that they're singing. Next we have the tsuzumi drums, which are these 2 drums in the middle of these 4 people here. First we have the kotsuzumi, which is this one, this small drum here. And kotsuzumi literally means small tsuzumi, small drum. And the tsuzumi drums, as you can see, are hand drums. The kotsuzumi specifically is a double-headed drum that's bound with ropes, and those ropes apply tension to the heads. It has a very distinct sort of toom sound, which you will hear in the video of these instruments playing together momentarily. And that's achieved due to just the natural construction of the drum, given the fact that the heads are much wider than the actual shell and the body of the drum, which are much smaller in diameter. So next we have the otsuzumi, which literally means big tsuzumi, big drum. It has also 2 heads bound by ropes surrounding a body, but its heads are much thicker than the kotsuzumi. The kotsuzumi heads are pretty thin, and the otsuzumi heads are quite thick and very tight across the body of the drum. The diameter of the sounding bowl of the drum is behind the head is much bigger than the kotsuzumi, which allows more tension to be spread across the head. And because the heads are so thick and so tight, it has a very distinct sort of snap sound when it's struck. And the heads are so tough that the performer is required to wear these little paper sleeves over their first and second finger on their right hand so that they don't bruise their fingers as they play. And lastly, in the drums, we have the taiko drum. Taiko is a word that is more generally applied to drums that have either rope-bound or tacked-on heads to a shell. They are played with wooden beaters. And this one, particularly used in the Noh orchestra, is of a medium-large size. And as you can see, it's bound with ropes on the side. And it's played with these small, maybe even you could call them medium-sized, wooden beaters. And when it's used in Noh theater, it kind of serves as a metronomic timekeeper. It plays evenly through the meter of a bar, or what you could call a bar, a measure. It's not as metrical as Western music, but there is a sort of pulse that is felt. The taiko just evenly divides that pulse, and it's very rhythmically even and metronomic. So now let's hear all these instruments together in a short example called Chunomai. So in addition to these instruments, there's also the jiutai chorus, which is a group of 6 to 8 singers that sing songs all in unison. An interesting thing about the style of music that they sing is that they only sing poetic verse. They never sing any of the prose that's written for the actors. They never sing along with that. Even though it's sung, or kind of sung, by the actors, the chorus does not sing along. All the musical phrases sung by the jiutai chorus make up 2 shorter phrases of 7 and then 5 syllable patterns, which make up a 12 syllable cycle. And by comparison to Western standards of singing, the Japanese singing style is quite nasal, and it all resonates right here in the back of the mouth and in the nasal cavity up here. And it comes from the chest. The voices come through the chest. They don't use their falsetto. These are all male singers, so they don't use their falsetto. In Kabuki, the falsetto is quite common, but in Noh, it's much more in the chest and in the throat. But it resonates sort of in the oral cavity, like back here, towards the back of the throat, and in their nose, like kind of like right at your cheekbones. It kind of vibrates your nose. And so it has this very pinched vowel nasal tone, which is appropriate for the Japanese language, which has these sort of, if you really extend the vowels of Japanese words, they sound quite weird because of just the way it's spoken. And so altogether, the role of this music in a piece of Noh drama plays many functions. It could be to characterize and represent a character's personality, or to simply set the mood for a scene. It can be performed independently, as an independent song or introductory piece of music, for example, like an overture, or just another section of music, independent of the drama. Or it can serve as accompaniment to a scene or a dance. And so a little bit more about the structure of a Noh play. There is this guiding principle in pretty much all of Japanese aesthetics, but especially in reference to the performing arts like acting and music. And this principle is called Jo Ha Kyu. And each of those words means its own thing. So first we have the Jo section, which is the introduction to the play. And this section is divided into smaller sections called Dan, which sort of function like scenes in, say, a Shakespearean play. There are 2 acts in a Noh play, which are divided into smaller Dan scenes. The first act has 4 Dan, and the second act has just 1, making 5. So the Jo, as I said, has 1 Dan, and this includes the introduction of the play as a whole. And this often occurs in the form of music. And this piece of music that introduces the play is called the shidai, and it is played while the actors enter from stage right. And if you see here in this presentation, there's a layout of a Noh stage, and actors enter from right here. You can it's a little fuzzy, but you can kind of see this line coming across this walkway here. And that's the curtain. So they enter down this walkway, which is called the hashigakari, which comes out here to the main stage, which is covered by a roof. It's covered by a roof kind of shaped like this. It's got like a little point on the top. It's 4-sided, but it makes this kind of, like, this is what the profile looks like. And that covers the front part of the main stage. And in the back of the main stage is the orchestra here. You can kind of see these 4 white dots are the drums here and the flute here. And then these 8 white dots over here is the jiutai. This is the chorus over here. So once the actors come out and they get in their positions on the main stage, it is always the actor playing a secondary role. They're not the lead character, but they play an important role. But they're secondary to the main actor, who is yet to come out. And they always speak first. And once the second actor speaks, this leads directly into the next section, the Ha, which is the development. The Ha section is composed of 3 Dan, 3 scenes. This includes the entrance of the primary actor, who is called the shite, and this entrance is accompanied by a bit of music called the Michi-yuki, which means down the path. And as the shite comes down the path, the orchestra plays the Michi-yuki music. And so once he comes out onto the main stage, he sings his first designated song, solo song, which is called the issei. This immediately leads into a section of dialogue. And the style of dialogue used in Noh theater is called sashi. This is the way that they intone their voice as they recite dialogue. It's very similar to operatic recitative. And the section of sashi that occurs at this point is called the mondai, which means questions or problems it can be. And this is a sort of exchange of questions and answers back and forth between two characters. Oftentimes, this exchange of dialogue between characters is accompanied by an exchange of notes between the two tsuzumi drums, the otsuzumi and the kotsuzumi. Once the mondai concludes, there's a bit of commentary from the chorus, who at this point is serving like a Greek chorus that you might see in a Greek play, who are innocent bystanders and impartial bystanders, just sort of providing a bit of commentary and maybe warning the audience of like, don't get into this same situation because look how they're screwing up, or something like that. The final dan of the ha contains the most important element in Noh theater, and that is dance. First, there's a bit of sashi recitative that reaches the melodic apex for the actor who's delivering it. And this leads into the dance, which is called the jo no mai, which is the first formal dance that occurs. And it's always called the jo no mai. That literally means the introductory dance. It's the first one. The shite, as I said, may lead into this dance with a bit of sashi recitation, and then the instruments will sort of pick up with them, and the chorus too. Sometimes it's just the orchestra that accompanies a dance, but oftentimes it's both the orchestra and the chorus. Once the dance concludes, there might be a short section of dialogue between the characters as the shite prepares to leave the stage. As the shite leaves the stage, this might include a bit more of dialogue involving another character, or a bit of music from the choir, unaccompanied by the orchestra. And if this occurs, this bit of music is called the nakairi, which means in between, and this sort of serves like an interlude between the two acts. This is the conclusion of the first act, which has had a big dramatic moment where this dance concludes, so many emotions have been expressed, and the music has picked up speed and intensity, but now it's sort of calming down. The chorus is singing rather softly, no one's delivering any dialogue, and there's sort of just a pause. And this leads into the kyu section, the conclusion. And this has just one kind of long scene, or dan, and this begins with another song from the chorus, which is sometimes accompanied by the orchestra, but again, oftentimes is just performed a cappella. And this is called the machi utai, which is a waiting song, and it is waiting for the shite, the primary actor, to complete a costume change. They might change their mask, and they might change their clothes too. Once that is completed, the play continues with another section of a solo song in issei by one of the actors, and another section of mondai recitative in sashi. And then this will all lead up to the biggest dramatic point of the play, which is the mai, which is another dance, but this one is so important that mai can actually be extracted from a Noh play and performed by themselves. That's how important they are, and how dramatic and choreographically difficult that they are to perform, that they can be performed separately. During a mai, the orchestra is playing all together. Sometimes it's just the chorus singing along, accompanying the dance, and sometimes it's just the orchestra playing music, but usually there's a song and instruments playing, and you can really feel the intensity when you watch it, because the dance is quite flashy. This is borrowed from dengaku. It has a folk dance element. It's more fun and flashy and not quite flailing, but rapid movements, sometimes jumps, and faster footwork that might be featured in the jo no mai. At this point, this is the most potent level of drama, and it's very tangible. So next we have a little bit more about dance specifically. I mentioned before the jo no mai, but I didn't say much about it. Let me tell you a little bit more. So this is the introductory dance. It's the first one that occurs in the play. And it's typically performed by a female character. Not always, but that is just what occurs most often. And female characters in Noh are played by men. All the actors are male, but female characters are represented by masks, as you can see here in this slide right here. You can see this picture of, this is a female mask. This is the mask of a young woman. A beautiful young woman, a noble woman most often. The tempo of the music and of the dance itself is quite slow. The footwork is very slow, smooth, and controlled, and there's not a lot of bobbing up and down of the body. For that reason, the range of expression is limited to the arms and the hands and the shoulders and the head. Mai, on the other hand, which occurs at the end of the play in the kyu section, is the ultimate dance in a Noh play. It is also performed by a character in a mask, usually playing the role of a demon, a ghost, or a vengeful character. This could be just a spirit who's angry, or it could be an actual person who is been upset by something else that's happened in the play, and they're taking their anger out in some way, and dancing thrashingly. And again, the music is played by the full orchestra at a much faster tempo. So now we'll take a look at some clips from a very famous and very often performed Noh play called Funabenkei, or Benkei on the Ship. And in this story, it's a bit of a legend. It's unclear to whether it's actually happened or based on anything true, but it has this sort of legendary quality to it. But it's a story of a prince named Minamoto no Yoshitsune, who has been exiled from his royal family by his brother, who's jealous of him because he is a good warrior and recently won a lot of battles. So he's on his way to another town, and he has to cross a dangerous bit of ocean, but his beloved courtesan girlfriend, Shizuka, begs to go with him. She really would like to accompany him, but he refuses because he wants to keep her out of trouble. So she accepts that and bids him farewell by dancing for him. The next day, Yoshitsune and his ward, Benkei, get on a boat to cross the ocean. During their travel, they narrowly avoid massive waves, and they survive that, but they cross paths with a vengeful spirit of a man named Taira no Tomomori, who drowned at sea while trying to invade a neighboring kingdom, and he wants Yoshitsune to drown in the same way. But Benkei drives the ghost away with incantations and spells, and they make it to shore, and the damned spirit is cast back out to sea.
しを弁慶にて候そての我がきに本願殿は頼朝の恩大官としかるにこせんの
Kabuki theater owes much of its style, content, and forms to Noh theater. Kabuki theater developed from Noh during the Edo period in the early 17th century. Early kabuki plays were originally performed by folk musicians in brothels. Therefore, because of that, because it was performed by such lowly people, the government dismissed kabuki as a legitimate art form. However, kabuki retained elements of Noh. It had the same sort of stage layout with the hashigakari ramp coming down from stage right and the pointed roof. It had similar themes and topics for scripts. It also retained the Hayashi orchestra and, of course, the principle of Johaku. New aesthetics to the theater, though, were different styles of costumes and a very new concept of makeup. So the costumes were slightly more elaborate than the costumes found in Noh, which you saw in the video consisted of sort of big, baggy, creased shirts and pants. But these new styles of costumes made characters much more easily recognizable and functional for the flashy choreography of kabuki. And this makes sense because the kabuki theater is quite large, as you can see in this illustration. It's quite large, so you would want your costume to be kind of flashy to be able to be recognized by someone way in the back of the theater. The stylized makeup used by kabuki actors is something called kumadori. It often features big black eyebrows, sometimes red around the eyes and towards the mouth, but it, at the very least, has the white base and the big black eyebrows. And this is just sort of to enhance characters' certain characteristics and physical facial traits, or sort of accentuate their personality and their individuality. This is most often worn by characters that are lords, warriors, and spirits. Another interesting feature in kabuki is the onagata, which are men dressed as women. And as you can see here in this picture, this is a man dressed as, this is Shizuka. This is the character of Shizuka from Funabenkei. This is not Funabenkei, but it's the same character. And this is a man dressed in women's attire, and his face is done up, similar to a geisha. Staging elements of kabuki were also much different than Noh. Most importantly was the addition of an extension of the stage, which is located stage right and extends through the audience for dramatic entrances and exits. It's called the hanamichi, which literally means flower path. And on the flower path, the hanamichi, can occur dances, dialogue, and of course there are fast sections of characters entering quickly or exiting quickly. It's a very common feature. Another important aspect of staging in kabuki is kata, which are particular poses or forms used by an actor to express certain emotions or convey certain characteristics of a character, or even just do physical acting in a particular moment. The most important and recognizable styles of kata is one called the mie, which is a particular pose where an actor suddenly freezes in place. They spread their legs firmly apart from each other. They sort of cock their head back, and they widen their eyes a little bit. And it's used for dramatic emphasis at the end of a section of dialogue, at the conclusion of a dance, or at some other highly dramatic point in a play. So the music in kabuki owes partly to Noh, but also to some folk music, and the shamisen, which is a new instrument. The shamisen began, of course, as a folk instrument from the Ryukyu Islands, which are south of the main part of Japan. It's down where Okinawa is. It's kind of halfway between the big island of Japan and Taiwan. It's those islands. The shamisen spread across the main part of Japan as it took over for the biwa tradition, the narrative music tradition. And this new form of narrative music was called kumi-uta, and it was just a new style of narrative song. It was first played by Wakashu and Onna kabuki theater players, which were male and female brothels, respectively. And then it was later incorporated into the more formal type of naga-uta kabuki. Naga-uta is a term that means long song. It is just a style of singing that includes more drawn-out syllables, and just the songs themselves are longer in length. Early kabuki performances, the ones at the brothel and even early in the actual theater, relied on short songs called ko-uta, which were essentially folk songs. They might have had slightly more to do with the actual plot of the play, but they were mostly folkish, and they were very song-like and short. The progression of kabuki style led to a new form of composition, and therefore a new style of singing. As compositions got longer, singers need to be able to sing longer. The Kabuki theater then absorbed the shamisen and its music, and this firmly established a new form of theater by the end of the 18th century. And now let's check out a performance of a shamisen accompanying a solo nagauta singer without any sort of interruption or distraction of the actors on stage. 'Another important aspect of Kabuki music is its extended use of percussion. Again, borrowing from Noh, it uses many of the same drums, the tsuzumi drums and the taiko drum, but these drums are used mostly to indicate plays that are borrowed from the Noh theater. So if a new play was written on the same topic as a Noh play, it would often begin with music from Noh theater. But new to the Kabuki theater was a very big drum called the o-daiko, which literally means big drum. It's similar to the taiko drum, but it's just bigger. It's a massive drum. It's probably about 4 to 5 feet in diameter and then about 6 feet long. And it's got big skin heads that are stretched across the shell and then tacked onto the side. And it's played with big wooden beaters that are about twice the size of the ones that you saw being played for the small taiko drum, the smaller taiko drum. Another important percussion instrument are the hyoshigi, which are a pair of wooden clappers that are used to call attention to mie poses and the opening and closing of the curtain. Other percussion instruments are used more specifically for certain scenes, like bells and gongs are used for temple religious scenes. Another style of music that is very specific for the Kabuki theater, because of the way the theater is constructed, is geza ongaku, which is offstage music. The musicians that play this music stand behind the main stage in a walled-off room called the geza, and they are able to look out on stage through slatted bamboo windows, and they are able to respond to any action that they see on stage while providing sound effects, but they also provide additional atmospheric music or can cover and add music that cannot be covered by the musicians that are actually out on stage, and again, additional sound effects through other percussion instruments. And so now we'll take a look at a sort of abbreviated clip of a larger play called Yoshitsune Senbon Zakura, which means Yoshitsune and the Thousand Cherry Trees. This story is directly related to the story found in Funabenkei. It's the same characters, but just a different scenario. The same prince, Minamoto no Yoshitsune, has been cast out of his palace by his jealous brother, and Shizuka, his beloved, is sent away to be sure she is unharmed. But this time, when she leaves, Yoshitsune gives her a kotsuzumi, the little double-headed drum from the Noh Theater, as a token of his love, just to assure her that the two of them will be together again. But this time, Shizuka decides not to listen and goes after Yoshitsune anyway, and she's accompanied by Tanobu, who's another of Yoshitsune's wards. Along the way, the two of them, Shizuka and Tanobu, admire the blooming cherry trees. They share stories with each other, and they dance to amuse themselves. Along the way, though, they encounter one of Shizuka's more uncouth suitors, whose name is Hayami no Tota, who shows up with an army, because he's like, "You're gonna come with me, Shizuka." And at this point, to protect Shizuka, Tanobu reveals himself to be a kitsune, or a magical fox, and drives the men away with his physical prowess as a bounding fox, and also with his magic powers. So check this out and really pay attention to the way the music is sort of involved with the dialogue and the little bit of dancing that they show, and the way that the sound effects correlate with the choreography of the fight scene. Well, I hope you enjoyed this presentation of all this music and all this theater content, and I hope you learned something from all of this, and I really appreciate you sticking with me and watching this whole video. Thanks so much.